Good afternoon, everyone. After some technical difficulties, happy to be with you. My talk today is how we go from business intelligence to network intelligence. I'm going to be talking a lot about data, data science, ways of analyzing data in a collaborative fashion. I'm curious if there anyone here who's a data scientist, analyst, Pythonista. Anyone here? All right.
Enthusiast.
I know there's a huge audience that's listening right now, so I'm speaking to you. But the point of this talk is that there's a lot of things that have happened in the open source movement that we think can be extended to the data movement. And by scaling the way that we collaborate around data, we believe that we can scale our collective decision-making ability and the ability to generate important insights that drive humanity forward. My name is Carl. I'm one of the co-founders of Open Source Observer. We're a 2-year-old company built entirely on a fully open source stack, and we focus on creating an end-to-end data platform that allows funders who care about the growth of Ethereum as an ecosystem to optimize where their funding is going and ensure that it's having the impact that they want. I'm going to talk about 3 things today. The first one is why we need a network intelligence movement to begin with. I will give a few practical examples of what that looks like from OSO's own work. And finally, there's a few calls to adventure, things that we can talk about with regards to our roadmap and what we see as the next steps. All right. So right now, the world we live in runs on siloed data. If you write SQL, if you're involved in the data world like I am, one of the biggest pain points is that there are 30 or so different SQL dialects, which are 95% the same. But when it comes to actually doing that remaining 5%, everyone has its own idioms, and it's absolute hell to go between each of these. That's one pain point. Everyone has their own data warehouse. People believe that is very proprietary, something they protect. They're not very collaborative around warehousing data. They run their own pipeline for transforming data, extracting it, using it for different dashboarding and for business intelligence. Everybody has their own requirements around scheduling, latency, performance, things that they expect from their data. There are licensing issues. Some data is public. Some data has restrictions on how you can use it, what you can do with it. There's also sensitive information. There's governance, access controls. All of these things taken together mean that it's very difficult for organizations to collaborate just around sharing of raw data. Then the final thing is that everybody has their own semantic patterns, their own way that they like to structure things, what they call a project versus an organization versus a team. And as a result of this, collaborating on data is very, very difficult. Basically, the modern data stack that we have, it was built for large corporations working in silos. It was not built for collaboration. Now, this is before my time. Maybe there's some graybeards in the audience who remember this very well. But the way that open source grew up is very, very similar. Back in the 1990s, you had the same kind of silos. People sharing tarballs and zip files, emailing them back and forth to each other. And it was very, very difficult to collaborate around software. Now, however, we have frictionless access, as easy as npm install or pip install if you're a Python developer. There are universal package registries and very strong incentives for people to keep those up to date and to version. There are standardized import patterns. Everything is forkable. If you don't like something, you have the ability to fork it, to extend it in your own way. And the result right now, as you can see at events like this, is that a small team today in a weekend is able to do things that used to take large enterprises and Fortune 500 companies months or even years to accomplish. So this has been a huge accelerator for innovation. It's unlocked global talent. We think it's one of the most powerful things about open source. Obviously, I'm preaching to the choir here. You all know this. But the point that we want to draw is that this has already happened for software. It has not happened for data. We are still living in the 1990s when it comes to data sharing and collaboration. What we'd like to see, a universal data marketplace that has broad coverage of public data sets, different types of licensed data sets that are easy to access. They're built on open formats like Parquet, which are easy to bring in and use in multiple data warehousing formats. Frictionless access. It should be as easy as npm install to add a new data set and to work with it. Of course, data has provenance. There's a lineage we want to be able to track and understand where it originally came from, how it's been enriched, and you should be able to see all of that in the same way that you can inspect the lineage of a code base. Of course, you want it to be interoperable with any data platform. Running it on your own servers, using one of the big cloud providers, there should be a higher level of interoperability. As I mentioned before, an acute pain point that you face if you're doing analysis is that you can write something in one dialect of SQL, and then as soon as you want to do something somewhere else, it's a real pain in the ass to have to transcribe that. I think the final thing, and I'll give some examples of this, is that so much work right now is spent getting your data, cleaning it, and loading it into a place where you can do something with it. But there's very little time actually forking someone else's work. So if I have this beautiful data set that's already been cleaned, I would love to be able to extend it, fork your dashboard, do my own data science on top of it. And right now, that's almost impossible. And of course, we view many data sets as being like a public utility, where there should be one entity that is covering the cost of storage and serving it to users. Ideally, there's a way that there could be like a cost sharing model so that not everyone has to pay for the storage, the egress, and the compute on top of it. So as you know, software fundamentally transforms the way that societies can be productive. We believe that open data can fundamentally transform the way that society makes decisions. I'm going to give you 3 examples from our work at OSO of how we do that. We're an end-to-end data platform. It's built entirely on an open source stack. This is quite rare. We didn't find anything else quite like this, and that was part of the reason why we felt that we had to build it ourselves. The most important goal for us is to accelerate the time to insight. For data scientists, spending as little time as possible collecting and analyzing and cleaning the data, and as much time as possible on the analysis and generating the insights. So you make it easy to connect data, deploy different types of models, and ultimately to derive insights. We can do that through creating a notebook. I'll show you a few examples of that. Hooking up LLMs that can know your data and that can help answer questions or one-shot the first step of having an analysis notebook or a dashboard. All those things are possible. And in this space, we have partners with the Ethereum Foundation, Optimism, Arbitrum Protocol Labs, Gitcoin, Octum, who's speaking later today. We tended to focus on the public goods ecosystem because we believe there's been very little attention to problems like where are developers coming from? Are they sticking around? What kind of incentives allow them to build things that are useful and that will grow the ecosystem? All right, I'm going to give some examples. Thank you for bearing with me earlier. We were trying to get these to load and the internet was not cooperating. I'm going to give 3 examples of the power of collaborative data science and open data. The first one is retrofunding. Are people familiar with Optimism retrofunding? So there's various incarnations of retrofunding. The one that I'm most excited about, that I'll talk about, is the current round, where they are rewarding both developer tools and on-chain builders, projects that are have some kind of application that's deployed on one or more of the OP Stack chains. And what they've done is they've created the entire value chain from revenue that is showing up on their chains to the developer tools that those application builders are using, to the dependencies of those developer tools, to the OP Stack itself, and to the dependencies of the OP Stack. So you can actually construct this very beautiful value chain that shows how value flows from research all the way down to the latest DeFi app. And what they've tried to do is quantify which products are adding the most value in that value chain. And every month they update the algorithm to take account of which products are using things more or less, developer velocity, many different things. I can give an example. So here is an example of OpenZeppelin, obviously one of the most important projects in the Ethereum ecosystem. What they can measure is all of the gas downstream of projects that are using OpenZeppelin contracts as a library. You can see who they are. You can also build a graph of all the developers that are either importing it or engaging with the project in some other way. And then they have been streaming them rewards every month. So this is a pretty significant amount of funding just from one layer 2 to be providing, especially in this market right now. And this is just one of hundreds of examples of things that they have been funding, no strings attached, just because the link between a valuable open source developer tool and on-chain revenue can be established. The next thing I will share, I have a dashboard, but I will switch that in a second, is measuring if these incentive programs work. So in crypto, you often see a large TG, a lot of tokens going out the door, and very little ability to see which of those incentive programs leads to sustainable growth. Are they attracting developers? Are the users staying? If so, what are they doing? How well do these incentive programs work? One of the things that you're able to do once you have these types of data sets is actually benchmark different incentive programs and create what's called a synthetic control, where you can account for different market factors. So in this example, we have analysis looking at an incentive program on Base, comparing it to 3 other networks where we've created a control group, or sorry, 5 other, and then picking multiple target and control variables. So we'll look at TVL in this case, which comes from DeFi Llama, a really great open data set. We're going to compare that against other variables that are collected from L2Beat and from Grow the Pie. And so because of the common data standards that we have, we're able to assemble all of these into one experiment, measure if this incentive program has worked, and play around with the variables as we try and control for different external effects. And so the result you can see here is that there was actually a pretty significant delta that was accomplished, and you can kind of quantify what that is, and you can compare that to other incentive programs. So hopefully this is the type of data that going forward can lead to better design incentive programs and higher ROI for token allocations. The last one I will share, we are working right now, sorry, let me just get this up. So how many of you have seen the Electra Capital Developer Report before? Okay. So this is a venture capital firm that is assembling data on every repository that is part of Ethereum, Solana, different ecosystems. The data is open, but the algorithm that they're using and the indexers that they're using are not. So we've tried to recreate this recently. We're working with the Ethereum Foundation to create an updated version of the developer report, which will go into much more detail on certain signs of the health of the ecosystem. This is the first version of it. Quite excited to show what we have here. But this is looking at the Ethereum ecosystem over the past 10 years or so. What you can see on the bottom are new developers that are coming in. And purple, you can see full-time developers or people that are converting from new to full-time. The green ones represent part-time developers in these different state transitions. And the really interesting thing is you can also look at churn over time. Our hypothesis is that the most important leading indicator for the health of an ecosystem like Ethereum is developer retention. New developers, that's going to follow the token price. But retained developers, our hypothesis is that is actually a leading indicator of token price. And we can see here, this is how Ethereum has performed. So you might say, I don't know, is this good or bad? Well, the only way we can add that context is by comparing it to other ecosystems. So we have a drop down here. I don't know, let's look at Bitcoin first. We can just see that. What you can see in the case of Bitcoin, the chart has been pretty steady up and to the right over here. Smaller ecosystem. After 2018, there's been very little rapid increase. It's been quite stable. But the churn rate has been relatively constant over the past 8 or so years. We can compare that with, I don't know, Zcash is the hot new thing right now. So we can see what that trend line looks like. Any other ones that you're curious about that you want to see? Let's look at, oh no, we just got rugged. I have Solana. We'll see if that comes back. They conspired. We're not able to show that right now. If it comes back, I'll show you. I've looked at it. I can tell you what it looks like. It's basically a big peak, drops a little bit, comes back, and right now it's not growing as fast as it was a year or two ago, but it's still fairly steady. One of the things I find very, very interesting as we were looking through these, Solidity. Back in the early days, the community of developers around Solidity as an ecosystem, not just the language of the repos that the Ethereum Foundation was maintaining, had zero churn. For like 6 years, there was absolutely no churn from the Solidity ecosystem. And obviously, since then there has been churn, but it was probably the stickiest, highest retention ecosystem we've ever seen. And I think, again, this is kind of before my time, it was because there was a very, very strong grassroots builder funnel that existed. So an important question for Ethereum and for other ecosystems going forward is how to use this data to inform your growth strategy, to inform your strategy for getting developers into the funnel, but over the long run, ensuring that they have the ecosystem, the libraries, the grant support, all the other opportunities that builders need in order to succeed in the ecosystem. What we're also going to be looking at is how many have churned or moved on to AI, and what does that ecosystem look like, so we can do a benchmark of crypto, Ethereum, AI crypto intersection, those types of things. So we're quite excited about that. In terms of what's next, this is the end of my presentation. Again, all of this starts with having public data and integration. So we're continuing to extend the amount of data that we're able to partner with others and ingest ourselves. We are trying to automate as much of the tedious workflows for DevOps and for orchestrating different data pipeline jobs. This is a big pain point. Ideally, we want to get to the point where you can basically one-shot a notebook like the one that I shared before, and use that as the basis for asking more detailed questions or coming up with a data science notebook or a dashboard. And then finally, my colleague Ray was here the other day. We're trying to create a new open source movement where it becomes the norm to revenue share with the projects that you depend on. Leaving that up to however you want to set the levels and what you want to fund. But we believe that it's very important that contributors to open source are able to have some kind of recurring revenue in the long run because the open source economy is so valuable. I think that's a great segue to what you're going to be talking about. So I will stop there. Well, thank you very much. Oh, and if you want to follow along, this is our Discord, and that's my Telegram handle.